The parrot on the pirate's shoulder. It's perhaps the greatest and most captivating lie we all still believe. We picture the scene, a hardened captain, reeking of rum and gunpowder, teaching a colorful bird to curse. But this image hides a truth that is much darker and more astonishing. Real pirate pets were not decorations. They were tools for survival, symbols of power, and, an antidote to madness. In the next 10 minutes, we will crack this code. This image was immortalized not by history but by literature, Robert Louis Stevenson's 1883 novel, Treasure Island. John Silver's parrot, Captain Flint, became so iconic that it was retroactively perched on the shoulder of every fictional pirate. This brings us to the central question. What would compel a man whose life was one of violence and robbery, whose guiding principle was trust no one, to bring a weak, dependent creature on board? The answer is the key to understanding the psychology of the ocean's most dangerous predator. Essentially, a pet was the only selfless relationship on the ship. All other crew members were business partners, competitors, potential traitors. The animal was the only one who demanded nothing in return but food and a bit of attention. Animals played three non-obvious roles on a pirate ship. The first, the role of a silent bodyguard. The second, the role of a living treasure worth more than gold. And the third, most important, the role of a psychological anchor that kept the captain from becoming a complete monster. Remember these three words: bodyguard, treasure, anchor. These weren't just roles, they were keys to three different locks: the lock of survival, the lock of status, and the lock of sanity. And we'll start by shattering the main myth. In reality, parrots were more of a valuable commodity, something to be sold for a profit, not a companion. They were loud, demanding, and completely impractical in a sea battle. In the 18th century, the price of an exotic macaw from the New World could reach up to 100 pounds sterling. For comparison, an experienced sailor earned between 10 and 15 pounds a year. This means one bird was worth 7 or even 10 years of a common sailor's work. This wasn't a pet. It was a living diamond. So, if the parrot is mostly a fiction, who was the real, indispensable animal on every pirate ship? The answer will surprise you with its simplicity and its critical importance for the survival of the entire crew. This answer wasn't perched on the captain's shoulder. It was hiding in the darkest corners of the ship, waging a war against an enemy more dangerous than any Spanish galleon. That enemy was the rat, and the main weapon against it, the ship's cat. This was no cute pet. It was a tough, irreplaceable crew member. The greatest threat on a wooden ship is not a storm or enemy cannonballs. It's rats. They didn't just eat the provisions, they devoured the ship itself, rope by rope, sail by sail. They carried diseases that killed faster than any cutlass. A single pair of rats on a ship with ample food could produce up to 2,000 offspring in a year. This wasn't an inconvenience. It was a mathematically certain catastrophe. Therefore, the cat wasn't a pet. It was a vital part of the ship's security system, just like the cannons or the lookout. For a second, imagine you're sleeping in your hammock in the hold. What would scare you more? A shout of "boarders" on deck, or a quiet scratching in the dark? The realization that rats are, right now, gnawing on the rope that holds the mainmast. For a pirate, the answer was obvious. That quiet, scraping sound, the sound of wood turning to dust, was more terrifying than any cannon blast. A cannon blast meant a fight, but that sound meant a slow, inevitable demise in the middle of the ocean. Of course, there were other functional animals. Dogs were brought for hunting on islands when the crew went ashore for provisions. Goats or chickens were a walking supply of fresh milk and eggs, an incredible luxury on a long voyage. Pigs were almost perfect for sea conditions, omnivorous, essentially living garbage disposals, resistant to disease, and provided a lot of meat. It was a grim but highly effective life support system. But practicality was just the foundation. True pirate captains went further. They kept animals not to save their ships, but to show the world who owned them. They turned pets into living gold. They made their pets not just a tool, but a living flag that shouted their success louder than the Jolly Roger. In a world where reputation was the only currency, an exotic pet was the loudest statement. It screamed without words, "I've been where you will never go. I've taken what you're afraid to even imagine. I'm so successful that I can afford to feed and keep this useless but incredibly rare creature on a ship where every hardtack is counted." It was the 18th century Rolex, only alive. It didn't show the time. It showed that you had stolen it from distant lands that common people had only heard of in legends. The ultimate symbol of this was the monkey, a capuchin or a marmoset. Smart, amusing, and most importantly, completely alien. Bringing a monkey from the New World to a pirate haven like Nassau was the equivalent of parking a rare supercar outside a bar today. It was pure social capital. Some monkeys, especially capuchins, could be taught to perform small tricks, snatch a purse, grab a key. This transformed the pet from a passive status symbol into a living embodiment of the pirate's nature, cunning, thievish, and disarmingly charming. Look at it from a merchant's perspective in port. When a pirate loaded with weapons disembarks, it's frightening. But when a captain steps off another ship with a tiny monkey and a waistcoat on his shoulder, it inspires shock and awe. It's a sign not just of strength, but of mastery over nature itself. He brought back not just gold, but a living, breathing fragment of a mysterious world. He was no longer just a bandit. He had become an almost mythical figure. And this is where parrots returned to the stage. Yes, they weren't common, but the rarest talking birds, like the African gray or the macaw, were the pinnacle of this game. Their price was astronomical, and a bird's ability to mimic human speech was perceived in those times as something supernatural. A talking bird wasn't just a curiosity. It was almost a magical artifact, which greatly enhanced its owner's status. But neither protection from rats nor showing off to rivals can explain why a pirate, after returning to his cabin from a bloody battle, could sit in silence for hours next to his pet. This is where the deepest and most human part of our story begins. The moment when the weapons are put away and the captain is left alone with his greatest enemy, the deafening loneliness in the middle of a vast ocean. A pirate captain was the loneliest man on the ship. He didn't sleep. He dozed with one eye open, listening to every creak of the deck. His crew was not a family. It was a pack of wolves that obeyed only strength. And worst of all, unlike a naval captain, a pirate captain could be removed at any moment by a simple vote. This pirate democracy was a constant sword of Damocles that forced him to live in a state of chronic paranoia. And in this world of total distrust, an animal became a psychological anchor. The only creature on board that didn't scheme. It didn't want your share of the loot. It couldn't betray you at a council. Its silent affection was the only honest transaction for hundreds of nautical miles around. Modern psychology calls this the biophilia effect, the innate human tendency to connect with other forms of life. For a pirate, it was unconscious self-therapy, the only contract not signed in blood or gold. Caring for something helpless, feeding it, cleaning up after it, these simple acts brought the captain back from the state of a predator to that of a human. It was his personal grounding ritual. In a world where life and death decisions had to be made daily, a simple act like pouring water into a bowl or cleaning a cage returned him from the storm of brutality to the calm harbor of basic humanity. Let's imagine a pirate captain's trust scale. At 0 is the Spanish governor. At a 3, your own bosun who holds a grudge against you. At a 5, your first mate who is your friend today, but tomorrow, who knows? And somewhere around a 9, next to the map of his hidden treasure, sits his pet, because it knows all your secrets but will never reveal them. The pet was the one treasure chest that didn't need to be buried. Its loyalty was a treasure no one could steal. This desperate need for sincerity sometimes pushed pirates to choose companions that were completely off the wall. Practicality and status took a backseat to pure, distilled madness. And that's when pets that were not just exotic, but living embodiments of their master's boundless power and absolute loneliness took the stage. There's a semi-legendary story of a pirate who kept a tame bear on his deck. Imagine that, a huge, unpredictable animal in the confines of a wooden ship. Every day, this beast required dozens of gallons of fresh water and pounds of food. On a vessel where the crew lived on strict rations of hardtack and salted meat, this wasn't just a whim. It was a daily, silent declaration from the captain. I am so powerful that I can feed a beast better than I feed you. I have tamed not only the elements and men, I have tamed wild nature itself. Bet. But the bear wasn't the only example. There were rumors of captains keeping ocelots and lynxes on chains, or even large snakes. These are no longer companions. They are living weapons, tools of psychological pressure. Here's a scene for you. A captain is negotiating a ransom on his deck. At his feet, a 2-meter python lies, slowly moving. Every word the captain says now carries twice the weight. His threats take on a physical, hissing form. This was pure shock and awe long before military strategists coined the term. The sight of a wildcat could break an opponent's will before a fight even began. The pirate mind knew no bounds when it came to power and intimidation. Somewhere in the Caribbean, there was surely a captain who seriously considered a combat alligator on a leash. Because for him, there was no such thing as too much. There was only not scary enough. So what do we see in the end? The practicality of the cat, the status of the monkey, the madness of the tame bear. At first glance, it's chaos, but in reality, all these animals were parts of a single code of survival. The choice of a pet was like a psychological test. It said, without words, what the captain needed most at that moment: order, glory, or just someone who wouldn't betray him. And this choice was not random. It followed a strict, unwritten code, a survival protocol that can be boiled down to 3 simple rules. 3 pillars that supported the captain's fragile world: a tool for survival, a symbol of dominance, and an anchor for sanity. First, rule number 1, ensure functionality. Before you dream of luxury, make sure your ship isn't eaten from the inside out. Your first pet is a cat, no exceptions. Second, rule number 2, display power. Your authority must be visible from the shore. Get a living flag of your success. A monkey on your shoulder says more about you than any cannon. And third, rule number 3, the most important, preserve your humanity. In a world where every other person is ready to stab you in the back, find someone who will be loyal to the end. It will save your mind. Functionality, power, humanity. This is the pirate's pet protocol, an unwritten code forged in fire and salt water. Essentially, for a pirate, a pet was not just an animal. It was a multitasking tool for survival in the most hostile environment on the planet. It protected his ship. It protected his status. And most importantly, it protected his sanity. And in this strange alliance between a ruthless predator and a dependent creature lies a surprisingly touching truth. In the end, the pet was a mirror. In its eyes, the captain, feared throughout the Caribbean, could, for a brief moment, see not the monster the world believed him to be, but simply a man. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable treasure he ever captured. And this brings us to the final question. What do you think was the primary, overriding reason? Cold, cynical calculation, utility and status, or deep human loneliness? Write just one word in the comments: calculation or loneliness. Let's see which one wins.